Hi, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about OEX as a brand, the positive points of them and a couple of drawbacks, one of them which I think is fairly significant. Now, I do own a wide range of OEX gear that I've used a lot over the years, and generally I think they're a pretty solid brand. Obviously they're part of the Go Outdoors brand, so they're owned by that company, so you can find them in like Blacks, Millets, Tissot, and obviously Go Outdoors. Now, I've owned quite a lot of gear and used it in different conditions. So in terms of tents, I've owned the OEX Cougar 2. I've taken that on a wild camp. I've used it a lot for campsite camping. Waterproof, reliable, strong, and I really like the design. So much so, I only sold it when I upgraded to the Cougar 2 EV, which is much lighter, smaller, more packable, much more practical for wild camping, but not as warm, has a lot more of a mesh interior. Again, decent specs, decent weight, pretty good quality poles, Unin T6, all that kind of stuff, and reasonably good value as well. So I like the EV range so much. I did purchase the Lynx EV1. I've not used it yet, I have pitched it. I like the design. It's a pretty cool looking little tent, and quite a lot of people who own the tent really do swear by it. It's been a really decent little wild camping tent. Nice small footprint, but pretty sturdy in bad weather. I've also owned some of the more popular OEX tents. So I've had the OEX Fox 1, the original version, which I did a wild camp in up in the Brecon Beacons, and I've also owned the OEX Fox 1 V2, and I've got a video which covers all the upgrades you get with the V2 version. Really solid tents. At the moment in time, I think you can get the Fox 1 V2 for like £49 brand new. Really, if you're going to go wild camping, you want a small packable tent, fairly lightweight, but really tough for UK conditions. £49, I just don't think you're going to get a better tent than that. However, drawbacks with those kind of things, quality control with OEX does seem to be a bit variable. If you look online, you'll see lots of mixed reviews. People absolutely love it, or they talk about problems that they've had. Now, I bought the V1 used, absolutely no issues with it. I bought the V2 new, and it did have an issue where one of the peg out points, it wasn't actually stitched, and there was just a loose bit of thread where it should have been stitched. So I had to have a friend stitch it on for me. Apart from that, quality was absolutely fine, but obviously your mileage may vary, and you'll see that if you're ever into the comment sections. So quality control, possibly an issue of OEX, but obviously you are paying less than you would for some of the main brands, and the main brands do have their own issues with quality control as well. Often they're outsourced in similar locations, so you might get similar quality control issues with other brands as well. In terms of general gear, I've had OEX waterproof, which was not at all waterproof. I took that out for a long walk at the beginning of this year, and it chucked it down on the way back. And yes, the rain was coming straight at me, but the zip completely failed. Water just poured in through the zip after a while. So I was absolutely soaked, and the shoulders were soaked as well. It was about £100 that waterproof. I didn't pay that, I bought it used, but in perfect condition and stuff. I even reproofed it and that. But no, those kind of zips going to be a failure point on most waterproofs like that. I've got an OEX down jacket. I'll put the model up now. It's no longer available, but I've owned it for 4, 5, maybe even 6 years, and I love it. It's one of my favourite bits of kit. It's absolutely tiny, packs down to nothing, only weighs 215 grams, so it's really warm for the weight. It's got 850 field power, and it's one of my go-to jackets because you can just live in your bag. It doesn't take up any space, doesn't take up any weight. It's a really good emergency layer when you're out walking or wild camping. Again, that got mixed reviews. It does lose a fair bit of down because the material is so thin, it's almost see-through even though it's black. But I find that that's probably going to impact casual people more often than not. Because what I found is if you wear like a cotton t-shirt or cotton material, put a jacket over the top, the cotton really seems to pick up the feathers and draw them out because they get hooked into the cotton. If you wear synthetic materials, so technical t-shirts, that kind of stuff. It doesn't happen. So that could just be casual people wearing cotton clothes underneath and not realising how much that snags onto the little down feathers and draws them out. So I've had it for a long time now, and it's still a warm jacket. Undoubtedly it's lost some down feathers in that time, but most down products do. One of my go-to backpacks is the OEX Valo 5060, a nice shade of red, and it has about 1 million different attachment points to it. So whilst it's not the biggest bag in the world, you can fit so much gear on the outside of that bag. It just makes it extremely practical. Now, I'm not sure if it's still available new, but it's almost always available used for very little. I got mine for £25 brand new from Facebook Marketplace. Really, really good bag for that. It's got its own rain cover integrated as well. And I see it all the time for 20 quid or less on eBay and Facebook and stuff. So if you're starting out to go wild camping, it's a brilliant bag because you haven't got to have tiny gear because you can fit so much to the outside of the bag. And so far, I've used it quite a few times. It's been really reliable. Everything still functions, all the zips and clips and stuff all work really well. I've never lost anything from the outside of that bag. It's just been a really, really good little buy. And it's probably my go-to budget backpack recommendation. And I have got a video on that backpack and what you can roughly get into it. I've also got a synthetic padded jacket, the OEX Idris, in a very, very fetching shade of blue. That cost me £49 quite a long time ago. And again, it's been a really, really nice bit of kit. Because it's synthetic, it's not as susceptible to getting soaked out and cold as a down jacket. And I found that really warm. It's really quite light. It's pretty packable. Again, for 50 quid or less than 50 quid, it was a really, really good buy. Owned it for a few years now and it's still going strong. Zip's still perfect. It still looks as good as new, really. I do look after my gear, but I do get out and do a lot of walking in it as well. I don't own an OEX Bobcat, but I do own the Northridge Coal Light, which is the tent that precedes it. Pretty much identical to the Bobcat, basically. They just rebranded it because Northridge is another Go Outdoors brand. Really nice little tent. The Bobcat gets quite a lot of love. It's a cheap little tent, single pole construction, decent internal height and space, nice porch area, and with a few modifications it can be a really, really excellent little tent. People add a few more guiding out points and stuff. But again, one of those little products you can get for very little money when it's on sale, and a really decent little bit of gear. I've used mine on a wild camp in the Brecon Beacons and I really quite enjoyed it. Perfect little tent for setting up in the rain because it's out of pitch or pitch all in one, so you haven't got to worry about getting in or wet. I haven't got many of those tents. Mine seems to be in a pitch first quite a lot of the time, so it's been quite good to use that one. Now, if you watch this channel, you know I like to buy a lot of used gear. I think there's a huge amount of value buying second hand or buying gear that people buy and then don't actually use and sell it on. Happens quite a lot in the outdoor gear kind of place. So that brings me to my sort of second reservation. The first one being variable quality control. The second one is you cannot go to OEX as a manufacturer and inquire about spare parts or anything else like that. It's just impossible. If you go to the OEX website, all it does is direct you to Millets, Blacks, Go Outdoors and Tissot where you can buy their products. I went through Go Outdoors a couple of times to source spare parts for OEX gear and just hit a brick wall each time. Each time I was told to contact the manufacturer, and despite patiently explaining that, look, you Go Outdoors, it's one of your own brands, you are the closest thing to the manufacturer that I can contact, they just did not seem to get it. They just kept replying, you need to speak to the manufacturer. So if you buy used gear from them and something's not quite right, if they don't stock the kind of spare parts on the website, which they do sometimes for some of the tent poles and stuff, if it's anything else, you're absolutely screwed because they will not they will not realise that they kind of own the brand and that they are, to all intents and purposes, a manufacturer. So I've got a bag, for example, the Valo Air 36. It's completely useless because I bought it used and didn't realise that the person had somehow, for some reason, taken out the bit of thick plastic that goes into the back, which gives the frame its structure. Without that, the bag just collapses on itself and the airframe unhooks itself and it's just impossible to use it. So I contacted them about that, got absolutely nowhere with them. The customer service didn't even understand what I was trying to get at in terms of, you are the manufacturer, you are the only people I can contact. They kept telling me to contact the manufacturer. They had no idea that it's actually their own brand. So completely useless. And the same with a set of trekking poles I bought, some nice carbon fibre ones, extremely cheap on eBay. They're missing one small part, which wasn't actually essential. I just wanted to have it. It's just one of the little handle bits that go around your wrist. Again, absolutely zero joy. Again, just told to contact manufacturer, which you cannot do because OEX are their own brand. So that is the one downside. Now, I'm not saying other manufacturers are always going to be really, really great at giving you spare parts or selling you spare parts or having spare parts available, but at least you've got a fair chance at contacting the manufacturer, at least asking those questions. And there'll be some manufacturers who do take pride in supporting their gear, offering spare parts, repairs, that kind of stuff. So that is one of the big differences if you go with like an own brand like OEX versus a brand that you might have more awareness of and that might have a much better customer service experience. But in general terms, those two drawbacks aside, I do think OEX are a decent brand. I think they make some really, really good bits of kit, and you can find reviews of most of their stuff on YouTube from people who've actually used it. Not to my knowledge do OEX send any gear to anybody, so I think all the reviews that you're going to find online are going to be from people who have bought the gear with their own money and they're just reviewing it to let you know what it's like. So I think as long as you go by those reviews and you're aware that sometimes you might get variable quality control, but if you are buying from Go Outdoors, obviously you can do a return and they can issue with a different version, one that's got all the correct parts or whatever, that kind of stuff. It's only if you're buying used or if you run into the problems down the line, just be aware spare parts for a lot of their gear is just going to be impossible to track down, whereas you might have more luck from other manufacturers who you can at least contact. OEX or the brand you cannot speak to. Still, I've got new bits of OEX gear to use over the next year. I've got the OEX Salamander bivvy, possibly the most pointless bivvy in the world because it weighs as much as most tents and just offers a lot less space and practicality. But still, we'll give it a go just because it does look quite cool and can't be any worse than the Outdoor Research Helium bivvy that I used, albeit that is incredibly light in comparison. Anyway, if you found the video remotely interesting or helpful, then yeah, drop the video a like, that'd be really appreciated. And I'll be sure to catch you in the next one, maybe.